Welcome to Your College Bound Kid,
a podcast for parents, college counselors, students, and anyone who wants a weekly deep dive into the world of college admissions.
Hi, I'm Hillary Dickman. I'm the Senior Assistant Director of Admission for Marketing and Communications at Colorado College, and I'm also a parent of 2 college students.
I'm Lisa, and I'm a clinical psychologist and college counselor. I have a daughter in college, a daughter in high school, and a son in middle school. After 30 years in Chicago, we recently moved to North Carolina.
My name is Mark. I'm a college coach in Atlanta and the parent of 2 daughters. Karis, a graduate of Davidson College, and she is the founder of the Spanish tutoring company, SpanishHelpToday.com. And Joy is a wellness coach at the Keenan Flagler Business School at the University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill. And I'm so blessed to be able to work alongside both my beautiful daughters at School Match for You, a college counseling firm that I founded in 2010. This week in the news, Julie, I answer a question. How do transcripts get from the high school to the colleges? And then Hillary joins me to ask a question from a listener on SpeakPipe. Who should my student ask to write the teacher recommendations? Jay Rosner is back for part 3 of 4, giving tips on how to get the best score on the ACT or the SAT. Then we have a brand new spotlight. Lynda and Lisa talk about Colorado State University and Fort Collins, part 1 of 2.
And now it's time for Hot Topics in the News.
All right, Julia, we're doing this has turned into a little bit of a series here of questions that we get asked in the counseling room. And so we figure if we're getting them in the counseling room, probably others out there have them as well. And so today the question is, how does my transcript get to the colleges I'm applying to? Because once again, not a simple answer, different systems, right?
Yep.
What do you want to share about this?
It is almost always actually the responsibility of your high school to transmit your transcript. You might have an official copy and you might be able to upload to your portal, but almost always if the college is looking for an official transcript, it needs to be sent through whatever your learning management system is at your high school or through whatever ways the college has stipulated. This is why you sync your Common App with your school, your Coalition app, or when you do another platform, that's why you put in the information of your high school. And in fact, so this is also why portals are so important, is that as a counselor, I absolutely submit everybody's transcripts, but there's the internet, right? Things get lost in the ether. So it is incumbent on the student. It is the student's responsibility to let the counselor know, hey, you're responsible for sending my transcript, but I don't see it there in the portal yet. So you're responsible for that. The difference in this, and this is definitely something that is upticking in the last 5-ish years, is that schools that get an increasing amount of applications, or schools that maybe work with primarily students who are applying to schools where you don't send a transcript, like the University of California system, you input your own information and they create a standard transcript for all of their applicants. So for example, a lot of California schools that have a lot of applicants will also not require a transcript from the high school being sent, because they know that's just not really a practice of those local high schools given where students are applying. So what most schools have done in this case is come up with, which we talked about many times, the SRAR, the SWAR, or the self-reported academic record. So schools like Pitt, NYU, Northeastern, certainly a lot of
There's quite a few schools. Like I find most of my students have at one school on their list, at least one that requires SRARs, SWAR,
yes.
And growing, yeah.
Right. And here's where I do think some students get caught. Some of those schools still actually use the transcript provided by the high school as the primary thing they look at, but to kind of streamline the amount of applications they get, like Northeastern does this. So they will use the SRAR as their first look, but then they'll compare the students' answers on the SRAR to the transcript that was provided by the school. So the SRAR is a portal of which you get access to, or you register for, and then the school usually pings you over and over. The college pings you over and over and says, "Hey, you need to complete your SRAR." And sometimes, or oftentimes, there's a finite amount of time of which you can do that. Clemson is my favorite example of that. What a mess so many years ago. Where they had a very finite amount of time, didn't really tell students about it. And then all of a sudden, like everyone who applied early action was automatically bumped to regular decision just because they never got into the SRAR within like 5 minutes of applying. But so the SRAR means that it is your responsibility to enter your academic information into that. And that is how the college might get your transcript and use your transcript. But when it comes to sending of official transcripts, that is your high school's responsibility. You might not see it happen, but there's maybe your high school uses Naviance, maybe you're at a private school, they use Score or Maya Learning, but we all have some sort of system that allows us to send your transcript. So it's all electronic now, but you'll notice even on some college websites, you can actually see that they'll say, hey, you can send transcripts to this email, you can fax to this. My favorite friends, Wisconsin, won't take a transcript in any other form except in the mail. So guess who's paying $17 to make sure your transcript got to Wisco correctly? But it's primarily the responsibility of your counselor or high school.
Zello is another one. Do you see that? That's another one. It's like XELLO. Like that's been creeping up more and more and more.
Oh,
I'm seeing that, especially in certain areas, like in Southern California. Yeah. So there are a bunch of these. Like when you go back in the day, Naviance like dominated.
Just Naviance.
Yeah. Like that's just the way it was. But now, like Score and Maya Learning, Zello, so many. It's like that whole market is. In fact, I once saw. That was at NACAC or SACAC. I once saw a presentation of market share amongst all of these, and wow, like there were quite a few that were like over 10%, but like under like high teens. So really split up market now.
Yeah, and Naviance is built for and serves public schools. So it's not often used by independent schools who do take advantage of Score, Maya Learning, Cialfo, these ones.
Yep, that's another one, Cialfo.
Yeah, and I'll just put this out there. Naviance is very expensive. It is very cost prohibitive. So
I remember back in the day it was super expensive, but I wondered with Score especially just cutting into their turf so much. I hadn't seen how much they haven't cut back still.
Nope,
so pricey.
They haven't done anything. And friends, especially if Naviance people are listening, it's like calling Comcast. You can never find someone.
Such a good example. They're the worst.
You never get a good answer. It's like no one works in college admissions there. But guess what? Naviance is really good at sending transcripts. It's quite easy. Yeah. So I will say, it is their school's responsibility. This is why, especially, please pay attention to the paperwork you might get from your guidance office or college counseling office if you're a student, because often there's a transcript release form that you have to sign. So the school knows I'm allowed to send these. And then if you don't use your learning management system and tell your counselors either through that system or to their face where you're applying, they don't know where to send the transcript. So you just do want to be following the instructions of your high school as well to ensure that all of your materials are sent. And it's not just your transcript, friends. It is pretty much all academic materials are sent by your high school with the exception of standardized test scores. So these are your teacher recommendations, or a lot of students now put in their teacher emails into the Common App, and that triggers your teacher to go into your Common App and upload your letters. So it's still the responsibility of those teachers. But your counselor recommendation, your teacher recommendations, your school report forms, and your transcript, those are all on the responsibility of the high school.
So talk about courses and grades, that is, because that's another thing that is very common for somebody to have courses and grades. And then do you get outside third parties, Parchment and some of the others that do transcript sending? Is that something you've encountered much of, Julia?
Yeah, so parchment is usually just in lieu of what the school might not. So, for example, a college might not take Naviance, but Naviance has parchment built in. So, MIT is a great example. MIT doesn't directly talk to Naviance. Naviance has a parchment built into them that will talk to MIT, for example. But what stinks is it's not clean looking on the counselor side. Like, I don't know if something was delivered or whatnot.
Well, I'll tell you this, like both my kids went to an independent school, and when it came to transcripts to college, we had to go pay that outside third party. Yes, I know, because I was putting my credit card in.
Yeah.
We had to pay that out. I think it was parchment, if I remember correctly. But we
yeah.
had to pay. I remember you had to put your credit card. I mean, they were crystal clear. It's screaming it at you that you're like, this is what you had to do.
Yeah.
But that's another model that's out there, is put it on the family to pay the fee and use the outside third party to do the sending.
Yeah. Oh gosh. And I have known some high schools that really just don't have students applying to four-year colleges, and so like literally don't have a system like that, but colleges will work with you. So you just give them a call and you're like, how do I send this stuff? So, and in fact, actually a lot of selective colleges, in an effort to be more accessible, really are understanding about that. So there's plenty of colleges that actually will take a unofficial transcript from you, for example. And then they'll just sync it up. If you decide to go and you matriculate, they'll just compare it to an official final transcript. But
yeah, so talk about courses and grades, because I mentioned it and someone might not know what I'm talking about. So talk to our listeners about that.
Yeah, so if you're filling out your Common App right now, friends, and maybe you've got an earlier deadline, you might be seeing a check mark that's missing. And that's the courses and grades section in your Common App, in your main Common App area. It's one of the last tabs. This was actually also what is great about Common App is they'll give you a list on those pages about which of your schools requires this and which doesn't. But I will find, actually kind of annoyingly, I'll often find that at least one school, and sometimes just one out of the maybe 12 you're applying to, do require it. It's like the SRAR. USC is a good example. Penn State, I believe, still requires it. And they all use it a little differently. But like the SRAR, it's meant to be a standardized version of a transcript. So it's a different looking in the Common App than the SRAR, but it's almost identical in its purpose, right? So you put in, what is your school system like? Is it trimester, semesters? List all of your classes in 9th grade and the grades. List all of your classes in 10th grade and the grades. So it can take an awful lot of time, friends. So I often tell students who are like stuck in some important part of their college process and they're just having writer's block or something, I'm like, go do the courses and grades section. You don't have to think about it, but then you're making progress on your app. But that is also like the SRAR, courses and grades does require you to kind of fit your courses into their defined ideas of what courses are or the levels of the courses. So I have yet to work at an independent school that had, college prep, and then the next level was honors, and the next was AP. I've never worked at a school like that where courses and grades is scheduled like the SRAR, or it is configured mostly for traditional high school. So it could take you quite a bit to fill out the courses and grades section because your high school might not fit perfectly into it. You want to give yourself enough time to talk to your guidance counselor to make sure you're being consistent and correct, because here's what I will say about the SRAR and the courses and grades section that has boggled the minds of independent school counselors and some other non-traditional schools into the fact that we still have no answer on this, is that some schools, even if the SRAR or courses and grades doesn't allow you to accurately report, some colleges will say, you lied on your SRAR and we're not going to take you. And it's to no fault of the student whatsoever. And then some say, like, try your best, that's fine, like how you report in courses and grades and SRAR, but it's so different from college to college that you just do want to spend some time with the courses and grades section and the SRAR. And if your counselor is also confused like you are, I try to call the admissions offices. Sometimes it's not helpful, honestly, but call the admission office and be like, hey, we don't have this kind of system. I'm not sure what to put for my levels here. But also it's good to know what the rest of your school is doing, because I have had colleges compare one of my students to another, and they entered their classes differently and levels differently for the same class, and they got in trouble for it.
Yeah, no, it's a lot. I had a student this year in Wisconsin who said it took them 2 hours. And
I believe
this
that.
was the student with one of their parents doing it together.
Yeah.
And it took them 2 hours to do it. Another thing, and this kind of syncs this conversation a little bit back with what we were talking with a week or so ago when we were talking about senior grades. So some schools also have in the portal an expectation that a student will upload the transcripts when those January transcripts come out.
Mm-hmm.
And notice in the portal, like, we expect you to upload through the portal, a transcript. And I don't know if that's just being sensitive to busy schools or, what your take is on that. But I'm seeing more of that.
Me too. My understanding from some schools, for example, the last school I worked at Milton, we never issued official transcripts to the student. You never got one, even after you graduated. No one gets one. So there was no way I could have a student upload a transcript to their portal. They couldn't own one. So I would end up calling the colleges to figure, what can we do? And so it did seem to me like they were mostly colleges that did serve a decent amount of lower income folks, or they had a lot of applications or served a lot of public schools. And so that was their way of trying to be like, oh, we don't need to inconvenience your counselor who might not be worried about this kind of thing. As long as we have some information that works. So I do think it's in an effort to just make sure everyone can get a transcript in when they need. And it's so rare that a student actually goes out of their way to fabricate a transcript, right?
Yeah. Like I see it a lot similar almost to self-reporting your test scores, right? Like,
totally.
Because some of these schools that do that, they say they'll take an unofficial. And so a student so they upload an unofficial, but then at the end of the day, the official comes in at the year end from the school, and then there's just that checks and balances. And I mean, why would you... Same for test scores, right? Like, why would you fabricate your test scores knowing
you're only going to
get outed and busted, and then they are going to rescind, and then you're going to look silly, and it's going to be very embarrassing, and it's not going to be a good conversation with parents. It's just bad all around in every way. So so it's just like, I could see myself, if I was making a decision at a school to allow a student to upload an unofficial transcript into the portal. And take work off of take some work off of the counselors.
Right.
I just don't think there'd be a lot of fabrication there.
Yes. And I think on that point too, it's okay if you make a mistake on the SRAR or the courses and grades, just get ahead of it. I've had a student who just misentered, it's a drop down menu for some of the levels, right? And they just kind of clicked the wrong thing, but we got ahead of it. It was fine. It happened actually with test scores. I had students who I had a dyslexic student who inverted their scores when they reported them. They ended up not being that drastically different, but it was a different score with different subscores in the ACT. Really easy to talk to the admissions office, and we got that cleared up. So don't also feel like you're about to go to jail for not reporting everything perfect. You do want to get it right. You want to be consistent. You want to be correct and honest. But if for some reason you make a small mistake on courses and grades or SRAR, just and SRAR, you can actually, it's one big portal for all the schools, so you can actually report that there, or you can call the college and let them know, oh gosh, I think I might have misstated a grade or a class.
Yeah, one thing I like Common App does, it kind of screams out to you when you have all your schools and you go through and you hit that button where you can see that big master. It shows you what schools require courses and grades right away. And so there shouldn't be any surprise on that, Yes. It's kind of screams out at you. And so at least it's, communication is clear. Cool.
Yes.
Well, thank you, Julia. Awesome. As always, hopefully, listeners, you enjoy these conversations. I know they're a lot of fun for me. Hopefully, they're beneficial for you.
Good luck.
And now it's time for a question from one of our listeners.
Friends, I am thrilled because Hillary Dickman is my QFL Question from a Listener podcast partner today. Hi, Hillary.
Hi,
Oh, we
thanks
love
for
having
having
you.
me.
You realize this is your first time in solo role? You've been on the roundtable many times, but this is the first time. Of course, you've been on to do
Yeah.
interviews and talk about a lot of issues. So I kind of get excited about new things. So thrilled to have you. So we're going to play a question from Anonymous Mom, and then I'm going to ask Hillary for some thoughts.
Hi, team. I love your podcast, and I'm excited to contribute this question. My daughter is applying to schools right now, and my question is about letters of recommendation. She is lucky enough to have worked with a professor at a large university on a research project, and this professor has agreed to write her a letter of rec. But she's getting some guidance that perhaps she should be submitting letters of rec from teachers in the high school setting who have worked with her more frequently and more directly. So is there any downside with her going with one letter of recommendation from the high school and one letter of recommendation from the college professor, or should she stick with all high school teacher letters of rec? Thanks so much. Love listening to your podcast.
What do you think, Hillary?
Yeah, this is a tough one. We really like to hear from two teachers because we really like to hear what a student is like in the classroom. I mean, that's why we ask for teacher recs. So it can be really great to get some sort of additional information about a student from a professor. So I would say that if you're applying to places that will allow you to upload a third recommendation, that I would stick with two teacher recs as your primary recommendations, and then have the professor send in their recommendation as the third or other recommendation, because I do think that it could provide some additional color commentary. But what the professor can't see is how you really behave in the classroom. And having two separate teacher recs gives us just sort of more information about how the student behaves in the classroom.
I agree with everything you said. So colleges love those two teacher recs, the schools that ask for them. And we can talk a little bit more about that in a second. So that's point number one. Agree with everything Hillary said. Plus, there's also an aspect where I always like people to be deferential and respectful of what they're hearing from their college counselor, who's encouraging that as well. And so that's even another plus factor. But most schools allow for an other, and it sounds like, the one you have in mind does. So there's also value in an outside the school perspective, and particularly if there's a close relationship and you feel like this person may know you quite well and might be able to shed some unique light and unique perspective that maybe won't be delivered in the other ones. And so there's always value if the college is going to get to know you in a different and fuller way. So that was my initial thought, is this could be a classic both and. A couple of thoughts for you, questions for you, Hillary. So one question I get a lot is going a little bit beyond this question, but, we have some time. So when schools ask for two teacher recs, there's kind of two perspectives. One is just send us two teachers from core classes, math, English, science, social studies, foreign language, preferably 11th or maybe 10th if they know you really well. Usually not 9th. It's a long time ago. Any two that know you the best, we're happy to have. And then there's other people that say things like, well, we'd like a math and a science, one side of the brain, and then like a foreign language, English or history. So that's kind of what we'd like. And then there's another argument. Well, if that's what we wanted, we would ask for that. There are schools that ask for that. I mean, Caltech, Harvey Mudd, and MIT come to mind. Those are three that ask for that. Georgetown's very explicit in what they ask for. And if a school really wants it, they'll ask for that. So don't worry about that if they're not asking for that. So I know we're going a little bit beyond what Anonymous Mom asked for, but I know our listeners enough to know that they would find this question interesting as well. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I would say that if a college asks for specific recs from specific teachers, or if they want the recommendation to be aligned with your major or your potential major, those are times that you should pay really close attention to what they're asking. Otherwise, when that's not the case, I would say going for the teachers who know you the best is your sort of best option. Again, sticking like with what you said, sticking within the academic subject areas. More recent tends to be better, but isn't always better, right? If the teacher from your sophomore year knows you really well and maybe has worked with you in multiple classrooms or multiple capacities, that could be your better route to go. So I really think it's more about the relationship that you have with that teacher and how well they know you than it is about a specific subject or a specific year in school. Most of the
No, I
time,
like how you said that, because there's times when I listen to a student I'm working with and 10th makes perfect sense. Some of those cases are ones you mentioned. They'll say, well, they're also my advisor for Model UN and I'm really actively involved. Or they'll say, I had them at 10th, but I'm going to have them again in 12th, and
Yeah, I think those are really neat opportunities because they can show growth over time also, which is fantastic for us to be able to hear about the ways that a student has grown, the ways that a student has sought out additional opportunities inside or outside of the classroom. Those are neat things that you would want to include in a letter of recommendation. So those can be great folks.
Do you generally encourage people to shy away from ninth because it's so long ago and the work may not be as rigorous and it's 2.5 years ago and I'd just rather get a more current perspective?
Yeah. And, I don't always notice when I'm reading a recommendation what year in school you had the teacher because I just don't have time to go back and put that together. But I have noticed that when it's a teacher who had you in ninth grade, often they will say that in the letter. And so then I can't help but notice it, right? And then it makes me wonder, like, well, what about all the other teachers
the best you got
since then? How come? Yeah, or just like, what am I missing? How come I'm not hearing from them? And it's different if it's someone you had in ninth grade who you have a continuing relationship with. But again, like we really want to hear about who you are in the classroom, and so more recent than ninth grade is going to be better.
And these conversations are complex because take a school as selective as Emory. I interviewed Will from Emory a couple of years ago on the podcast, but he also had Atlanta Public Schools when I was doing school-based counseling. So I sat in on an information session that he did with our students, and he's like, "We don't care if it's ninth, as long as it's a teacher," and so that's one perspective from a different person, and I did talk to him afterward, but that's not what I hear from most people. So it may be true for you, but just goes against what a lot of other people say. And I bring that up. I'm not criticizing Emory or Will at all in any way, shape, or form. I'm just making the point that different schools can be different in terms of their policies and on this kind of thing. But I feel it is safer to go with 11th, ideally 10th next for a couple reasons. One, they're more recent, right? And you're trying to get a read on how somebody is now, not how they were 2.5 years ago. And then it does oftentimes tend to be a more rigorous class. So getting a read on a more rigorous class, especially for a selective school, has value over an intro class.
Yep. Yeah, that would be my thought on it, is that being in a more rigorous class, even if it's not like your most rigorous class, just being in a more rigorous class gives me a better feel for how you're going to behave in the college classroom.
Do you feel when you're reading, Hillary, you get a sense of how whether the teacher knows the student? Does that come through in the reading?
Yeah, sometimes it does and sometimes it doesn't. I mean, I don't think that our teachers should be expected to know every student that well, right? Like there are always going to be times when you know some of your students really well and you don't know others that well, and that's okay too. Like I don't want to put the pressure on teachers to feel like they have to have these close relationships with every single student in all of the classes that they teach. That's a lot to ask. I just want to get a feel for, how you interact with your classmates, how you respond to when the teacher poses a question to the whole classroom and there's that silence, and nobody wants to answer. Are you ever the first one to raise your hand, or do you wait and then do you offer something really special later on in the conversation? Like, what kind of student are you? And I don't think that your teacher has to have a super close relationship with you to be able to
No, I think that's really important. And especially, I'm on the counseling side now, but sometimes it's a source of pressure for students when they feel like it's a large class I don't know that. And
Yes.
this also comes up
Mm-hmm.
with counselors. Like, I keep getting a new counselor every 3 months. How am I
Mm-hmm.
supposed to get to know my counselor?
Yeah.
So I appreciate you taking that edge off of that in terms of pressure.
Yeah.
Last question on this. You already answered several things, but what are some of the kinds of things that teachers comment on that you find very valuable?
The ways that students help their peers when they're working in groups, the ways that they can be counted on to contribute to a class discussion. And that is maybe especially true because I'm reading at a school where all of our
Sure.
courses are discussion based. And so it's really important that we have students who are going to be part of those discussions. I appreciate it when the teacher, when they know the student well enough or have interacted with them well enough to be able to comment on, this is the student who I can always count on to stay afterwards to help clean up the classroom. That's really special when I hear that, and kind of rare. I mean, most students are not that student, and that's okay. Like, everyone doesn't have to be that student, but it is fun when you get to hear that. So really it's about, like, how do you interact in groups? How do you respond in discussions in your classroom? Do you reach out for help and ask for help when you're not doing well in a class? Are you the kind of student who pays attention to the comments on your paper, or do you just go straight to the grade and then nothing changes the next time that you turn in a paper or the next time you take an exam? We're looking for students who want to learn, who don't just stop with a grade, and teachers can be a really good source of that kind of information.
Do you find anecdotes and little mini stories helpful to see the student in action as opposed to just a bunch of adjectives?
Yeah, sometimes that can be really helpful. Again, like, I don't want to put pressure on teachers to feel like they have to have an anecdote about each student. So certainly that's not necessary. But if the teacher is really trying to drive something home, that can be helpful. And that really ends up happening in the minority of teacher letters. Most of the time, we're going to get more adjectives and a couple of very short examples. And once in a while, I'll get a long story. And those can be great also, but I don't expect that from teachers. And when I'm reading an application, a teacher rec is one small part of the big picture. And so teacher recs also don't, like, get a student in or sink a student either. It's just part of the bigger picture. And of course, we
say that about virtually every component, right? Essays don't get you in. The counselor letter doesn't get you in. Even grades don't get you in, as important as that. Rigor doesn't get you in, as important as. So everything's part of a big picture.
Yeah. The one thing that I would add to what Anonymous was asking about the professor recommendation is that those recommendations can be really good for scholarship applications. So, like, at CC, I work with something called the Barnes Scholarship, which is a scholarship for science majors. And we ask for a specific recommendation written by someone who knows the student's science capacity. And I think that with similar science scholarships, if you've worked with someone outside of school who understands sort of how you've leveled up in that area, that can be really great to include in a scholarship.
Hillary, this was awesome. I loved it. I just want to underscore one last thing you said, which is a lot of times if a school does admit by major, and if major plays a pretty big role in the process, those are times when it can often make sense to say, okay, I'm applying as a science major. Let me see if I have a science rec that can speak to that versus more of the liberal arts, that's interdisciplinary.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
And now this week's interview with a special guest.
Friends, in part 3 of 4 of my interview with Jay Rosner, where we're looking at all the different things a student needs to know in order to get the best score if they've decided that they do want to go forward and take the test. And Jay starts out by talking about what a middle school student can do, or a 9th grade student, or a student at the start of 10th grade, and how they can be preparing themselves to do well on the ACT or the SAT years in advance of actually taking the test. And Jay gives specific different instruction for the math section versus the English reading and verbal sections. Jay and I discuss, when should a student start their formal prep for the SAT? Should this be in the summer of the rising 11th grade? Should it be in the fall of the 11th grade? Should it be in the spring of the 11th grade? Should it be in the summer of the rising 12th grade? Should it be when they have time? We talk about all of these things, and the two of us express slightly different opinions on this topic. And Jay warns about the danger of the serial test prep student. Listen and enjoy.
In the context of like a 6-week course, you want a class size that's small enough that the teacher within a week, a couple of sessions, can have a good sense of who you are and an experienced teacher can make some suggestions. If you're in a class of 25, you have to come after class to get any one-on-one. And then, the class is too big for the teacher to have any sense of who you are. So the things that you're balancing are the one-on-one attention and the efficiency and the personalized focus versus a small class where the teacher can get to know you, not quite as well, not fast enough, but can get to know you pretty well in a week or two in a class of 10 or 12. And you have the energy of the other students and the additional drive, the sort of implied competition, you want to show yourself well because there are other folks around. Those can be motivating forces that are absent in one-on-one tutoring. And then, as I said, I think a larger class just loses so much. You still have a teacher, and if you have maybe 6 hours of tutoring, as you mentioned, maybe that cuts the difference that bridges the difference that I'm talking about. But the two of the basic factors are individual focus without any kind of group energy versus group energy that has the potential for some kind of individual focus, and which of those two formats. And some students just shrug and say, well, I'll do both. I'll take a course and then I'll do a couple of weeks of tutoring, and if you have the resources, that might be the best.
So, Jace, every now and then somebody will, really young, I'm talking parents of a 7th grader, will want to start prepping. And they'll bring it up. Oh, the SAT, what should I do? And obviously I'm not encouraging that. But what are the things that a student can do that's younger that will just naturally be preparing them? Is it just read widely, read wisely, engage in math problems? What are the things that somebody can do to set themselves up to sort of automatically be preparing without formal preparing, let's say during, I'll throw out grades, 6 through 10 or whatever, but that's not exact, but you know where I'm going with this?
I have some suggestions because anxious parents have asked me that over the years. And one thing I could tell you, so let's break it down between math and verbal.
Sure.
On the math end, I can suggest something that I, in fact, did as a kid that I found to be really helpful. I used to go into the drugstore, now I'm talking in the last century, but they still exist. Used to go into the drugstore and, these little booklet racks and stuff. I used to buy comic books, but that's another thing. But on these booklet racks, there would be these puzzle books, brain teasers, brain twisters. And almost always they were math-based. And they encouraged you to try to look at math situations. They weren't straightforward. You had to develop a little bit of insight to figure out these things. And I found that was a particularly, looking back, and I did that when I was in 7th and 8th grade. Looking back, I thought that really attuned me to not only have a little more insight into trickier math situations. And that's, the SAT is Algebra 1, but tricky Algebra 1 questions, as is the ACT. And so if you have that sense of this is a challenge and it's going to be a little unusual and it's require me to do a little bit extra. Those kind of little puzzle books I found to be very helpful. And if you think about it, it's also, and this is something that would be best if a student says, "Oh, I'd like to play around with this," rather than a parent saying, "Here, do this."
Right. If there's some buy-in. Yeah.
Right. Buy-in and actually sort of coming to grips with the challenge of, can I get these correct? I mean, I want to solve these things. Oh, that's how you, because they always have the answers in the back. Oh, that's how you do that. And so next time I see anything like that, I have a better chance to do that. That's on the math end. That would be an add-on, Mark, to doing really well in your math courses and really paying attention. And really, if you get a B on a final exam, not patting yourself on the back, but saying, that's not bad, but I got to find out what I missed. And I've got to really work on tightening up the basics of algebra, arithmetic. I mean, fractions, decimals, and percents. Students are weak on those. They need to really, because you can know the math and not do the fraction and get the question wrong when you actually know the algebra 1. You didn't know you were rusty on the arithmetic end. So fractions, decimals, percents, arithmetic, algebra 1, and geometry. I mean, do well in those courses, pay attention and understand what's going on. And that's a really good basis. So the puzzle book isn't the substitute for that. Puzzle book is an enhancement of doing well in your math courses. On the verbal end, it's strength of reading and comprehension and vocabulary.
You recommend looking up words when you don't know them, when you read and you don't see a word and look it up?
Yeah. And I was going to say it's as simple as that, but obviously it's not simple because strength of reading involves all kinds of stuff that you develop mostly by reading and by trying to understand, not just letting words pass by your eyes, but trying to understand what you read and looking up words that you don't know. And there's no substitute for what everyone's 5th grade teacher used to tell them. I don't know in the digital age if they do, but you're reading, you have a dictionary there, and you actually look up the words that you don't know when you're reading. Now, I don't know if students are, tapping into the dictionary as they're reading on a screen.
It's on their phone now. Yeah, it's on their phone. I'll share this with you, Jane. This won't surprise you, but, when I was doing boarding school admissions at Westtown, of course, we accepted the SAT and the ACT for the student standardized testing, but our main test was they have the SSAT, which is extremely similar. The correlation, it's like 97% correlated with the SAT.
Right.
You've seen that data. And this happened to me, I kid you not, more than 80 times. Sometimes we would have the SAT scores before a kid would come through. And if they were in the 97th, 98th, or 99th percentile in the independent school population on the verbal, I would ask them, do you like to read? And do you know every single time? And I asked that question more than 80 times. Every single time when somebody crushed their ACT, their SAT, or their SSAT score, they were a reader. Every time.
Absolutely. There's a lesson that I learned that's parallel to that from my experience, and that is working with students on the GRE and finding out their SAT scores. And, a student who goes from a 50th, 60th percentile on the SAT to an 85th, 90th percentile on the GRE, where the GRE test-taking pool is a more
higher.
Limited, it's a tougher test-taking pool than the SAT. So that kind of gain is really significant. you know, what happened to you in college? I became a reader. I didn't read in high school. I read in college. And the GRE, and I knew that I wasn't 80 students. It was probably 25 or 30.
Right, but you had the same experience that I had, just with the smaller, slightly.
Same
And for those who
exact
aren't following it, GRE with being at grad school, it's going to be, more higher academic population than a high school kid.
Although
so that's why going from 50 to 85 is pretty impressive.
Yeah, although there's an irony that people don't realize that you'll find, I'm sure, humorous. What I tell students is GRE verbal section, you're gonna, vocabulary is gonna hit you. It's college level vocabulary. Now you'll say, similar format, paragraphs, questions, the English language. You're going to have a general comfort with it, except that it's a higher level of vocabulary and a higher, and the passages are written at a higher cognitive level than the SAT. Math, GRE math is easier than SAT math.
Interesting.
Easier. Why is that? Very simple. A lot of folks taking the GRE haven't taken math in college more than maybe a freshman course. If it were as hard as the SAT math, we just wipe out too many kids. So it's actually and I would mess. I was not above messing with SAT students, particularly the strong students, students who were scoring like 1,400. 15, I would have a good time with them. And I would say to those students, okay, you think you're sharp. You think you're good at, you're getting 700. You're getting 650 on math. You're getting 700 math. You think, wait until you see GRE math. Like, give them a GRE math section. And they're going like, this is ridiculous. Why do I have to go to college?
Hey, you're disincentivizing people to go into college.
No, I'm having a good time with them.
I know. I'm having fun with you.
Believe me, they're going to college. Their parents won't let them not go to college.
I'm sure. So here's another question I have. It's my last question on this. And then let's talk a little bit about California. When do you recommend people start? Because here's what I would say would be the three different things I hear out there in general. One is the end of your 10th grade. Take advantage of the rising summer of your rising 11th grade, as long as you've at least had Algebra 2. And the thinking is you're going to want to have Algebra 2 because there's a decent amount of Algebra 2 in either the ACT or the SAT. And you have more time then. And so you have time to be undistracted and to do the hour and a half. And at that point, you can take an August SAT or a September ACT or even a July, bang it out. So that's one. And then some others feel either the fall of 11th or the fall or the spring of 11th. And so those are kind of the different models I hear out there as to when a kid would do that 6 weeks. And then the other one is, look at when you just have time. Like, if you're going to be crazy busy in the fall with your soccer, well, that's out. But in the summer, if you're at an 8-week summer camp and you can't do it, so that's out. So take a look at when you're going to have a good 6-7 weeks you can dedicate to it. But those I would say would be the three most common things, right? Summer of your rising 11th, fall of 11th, spring of 11th. Starting at summer of rising 12th feels kind of late, just because, whatever, you get sick or whatever, and things change, and now you're into the senior year. The idea of starting your prep in the fall of 12 feels completely inappropriate with all the deadlines looming, and the senior year should be your hardest year. So what are your thoughts on that?
Two thoughts that come to mind on each of the issues. One is a lot of students wonder, when should I take the test? What should my test date be? Wrong question. Correct question is, as you pointed out, what's the 6-week period where I have the fewest distractions, where it will be best for me to concentrate on SAT or ACT prep? And whenever that 6-week period is, assuming you can get an official test date somewhere within a week or two or even 3 of the end of that period, that's when you should prep. So having said that, I watched from when I started doing test prep stuff in the late 1980s. It was fall of the senior year, and I watched the focus migrate to summer before the senior year as to when to prep and take the test, when then migrated to the spring of the junior year. And then back then there were a few kids doing it in the fall of the junior, and over time the testing moved earlier and earlier. I think the spring of the junior year is I think the sweet spot. Again, assuming a kid isn't in spring sports, and then should move it either a little earlier or a little later. Spring of the junior year is really a sweet spot because it gives you summer as a fallback. And I don't like to see, I would be afraid, Mark, of the kid who takes it in the summer before junior year and with the implicit or even very mild sense that, oh, this gives me a lot of time to do this. And then ends up with serial preps for, if that kid is a little earlier than other kids in that kid's school, and the kid does their prep and gets a score that's reasonably good, but they think they can do better. Then they might prep again when everyone else in their school is doing it and get into a cycle of re-prepping and retesting, which get a life, it's just.
The only pushback I'd give on that a little, Jay, is, boy, these kids are so busy. Like
Right.
spring of 11th, like what I see in terms of extracurriculars, and I'm particularly thinking of kids here that are taking really challenging curriculums. Like, obviously APs are then. So that's kind of, you go into prepping for that April
Right.
and May.
Right.
And then so many kids are so busy with their extracurriculars because, I do this thing when I'm working with students where I give them a couple options for writing their personal statement. There's a 650 word personal statement.
Right.
Those prompts are out anywhere from the end of January to the start of March. So I give people an option of doing kind of a March option. Let's get it in before they go into APs, or let's do it like as soon as the school year is done or after your APs, before the individual college specific custom prompts get released later in the summer. And a lot of kids opt for the latter option just because they're just slammed. So the idea of like doing an hour and a half a day for 5 to 6 weeks, given kind of the rigorous schedule and the extracurriculars, at least for a lot of kids I work with, that feels like that could be overload.
Yeah, well, the time period has to be placed when the kid has some breathing space. And if you're talking about being overloaded in one time frame, whenever that is, then it should be done before or after that. And
That
if
makes
doing
sense.
it after that backs you up in other ways, you got to do it before that. And now I'm also working, for the last 25 years, been working with low-income kids who don't have the kind of community. I'm typically working with a nonprofit with kids that don't have the kind of community support to focus on doing an SAT prep. And it's only when it's looming, spring of the junior year, summer before senior year, when they sort of say, well, I kind of have to do this now. They're not being pushed at all, or perhaps mildly pushed. And that's when motivation kicks in of, oh, now it's time to really focus on. So I'm not dealing with typically with private school. I'm dealing with public school kids.
And motivation is really important. The
Well,
buy-in of the kids,
motivation is key.
when they're ready.
And so the motivation, so the motivation to think about a college test at the end of sophomore year just kind of isn't, it's too far away.
Yeah.
So
That's definitely true for a large swath of kids.
yeah,
Yeah.
so you have to balance that. Now, if you're talking about private school kids who are highly motivated as sophomores, then knock out the test.
I'm primarily talking about public school kids, but kids coming from pretty good school districts with a lot of parental support. But I agree. The point being on the motivation.
Motivation is key.
Yeah.
There's there's a story and a wrinkle. The wrinkle is kids who do really well as juniors or seniors on the SAT, and I've been suggesting this to some Native American kids at the conferences I go to, take the GRE as a high school senior.
For
It's
confidence?
good for 5 years.
Post your score, you mean?
Yeah, take the GRE for graduate school.
Sure.
If you decide to go, like it's way too early, but you just done the test prep.
Right.
The GRE is similar enough.
Yeah.
Spend a week or two on the GRE because it's a slightly different. There's still analogies on the GRE. SAT got rid of them.
Sure.
Knockout, and of course, verbal is the if it's the kid who scores really well on 700 on SAT verbal. Take the GRE and you're good on math. Math is easier on the GRE. Take the GRE. And I haven't had any buyers. I've suggested a couple
Not surprised.
but it's there's built-in absurdity in all of this that actually demonstrates. And I do that because there was a kid at Dartmouth, and I talked to the Dartmouth pre-medical, pre-law advisor. A kid came into Dartmouth as a freshman with an LSAT, with a really good LSAT score, because they took it senior year in high school, and the counselor just didn't know what to do. The advisor didn't know what to do with it, and I said, my position was, I love it. It just shows the absurdity of this whole thing, and what it does demonstrate is the incredible correlation. You said between SSAT and SAT. It's
Same
between
for
SAT
GRE.
and GRE, SAT and LSAT. What the tests predict most reliably is the next test score. Now, that can be broken by good prep, by a kid who reads in college and can boost their verbal score. But that's part of the underlying absurdity that's in this domain, where the test is viewed as measuring your abilities in a general sense, when it's measuring in a large sense your test-taking ability, which stays pretty constant unless there are pretty significant interventions.
Friends, this concludes this part of my interview with Jay Rosner. I hope you'll join us next week for the next part.
And now it's time for our College Spotlight of the Week.
So, Lisa, are you ready to talk about Colorado State University?
I told you this earlier. I was born ready to talk about Colorado State University, so I'm very excited.
I visited Colorado State back in June, and I dragged my husband along with me on this trip, and he fell in love. So we may be retiring somewhere in Colorado. Not sure if it's going to be Fort Collins, could be Golden, but he seemed pretty excited about it, which just goes to show you that it truly is beautiful. But let's start with the basics about Colorado State. So Big State School, founded in 1870 as the Colorado Agricultural College, and it's in Fort Collins, which is really it is a great town. It's kind of that, well, it seems big to me, given where I'm at, but it's about 170,000 people, which is small for a lot of folks. It's an hour north of Denver, and this is probably why we liked it so much, at home to about 20 breweries. So it's a fun place to be. What can I tell you? Fort Collins at the foothills of the Rockies, which means you have stunning views, but it's flat. So I kind of like that, but really beautiful. And it's the at the Fort Collins campus, it's about 1,400 acres, so it's big. And then they have a mountain campus, which is maybe 2 hours away from Fort Collins, where the elevation is 9,000 feet. And it is really for conferences, workshops, retreats, and it's only open May to October. So they close it, I guess, during ski season, which seems to me, but I didn't get a chance to visit that. Colorado State, as you can imagine, is a good-sized school, about 25,000 undergrad students, 6,500 or so grad students, and it skews a little bit female, 55% female, 45% male. This is not an overly diverse school. So it's about 70% white, 16% Hispanic, and then Black and Asian is about 2 or 3% each, and 1 American Indian, and only about 2% international. 66% of students are from Colorado. Now, all of that said, this is not a campus. I felt that it was very inclusive, that it was a really welcoming campus. So the lack of diversity, I wouldn't think should preclude anyone from attending, because I really felt it was welcome to all. Average class size here, and they actually published this, which I love. For lectures, it's 57 for lower level courses, 38 for upper level courses, so a little bit larger. For labs, 23 students for lower level and 19 for upper level. Student to faculty ratio is 17 to 1. And I also like this stat: 9 out of 10 grads say they would choose Colorado State again, which I think is a really good sign. Residence life, talking about students on campus, about 24% of students live on campus, and those are mostly freshmen, and they have choices. They've got about 15 or so residence halls. Traditional, suite style. You can choose your roommate. You can go random. A lot of students live off campus. Fort Collins is right there. And the school has very good town and gown relationships. So they are a part of Fort Collins. Students who do choose to live on campus, they do have learning living communities. And I think they've got about 11. And range from, students in the biomedical sciences, natural sciences, engineering, the arts, outdoor leadership. And they also have a non-residential program for community college transfer students, which I think is great, because sometimes those students can get lost in the shuffle when they come transfer in. They also have something called SLICE. And this is the Student Leadership Involvement in Community Engagement, where students can get involved with leadership opportunities on campus and in the community. And they have something called involvement advising, which I love that. So
yeah.
If you're not sure how to get involved on campus, you can schedule a meeting and they can talk to you about all the different ways that you can become involved, either on campus with activities off campus. They have a leadership program. They have a social justice retreat, all kinds of experiences for students. Like I said, really welcoming campus. They do offer academic support, and they call this TILT, the Institute for Learning and Teaching, where they offer free tutoring and specialized tutoring in those traditionally hard subjects like well, they're all hard for me, calculus and chemistry and physics.
Stop,
I know.
Lynda.
I know. Taking me back to, I don't want to think about biology second hour in high school. They also have virtual drop-in tutoring. So for calculus, chemistry, statistics, and mechanical engineering. So really a lot of support for those students who may be struggling with some of those more traditionally difficult programs. And they also provide free private tutors if you need specialized help. So if you need something in particular to work on, they're going to be there for you. And of course, they have academic advisors. They have a writing center to help you. And their library has got a lot of services, including how to research. So a lot of students come in without ever having done a big research project, and their library will teach you how to research and give you access to peer research mentors. So upperclassmen who have been there, done that experience. They offer support centers. Some of them are the Asian Pacific American Cultural Center, Black African American Cultural Center, El Centro for Hispanic and Latinx students, Native American Cultural Center. They do have a Pride Resource Center. So again, just because the numbers say it's not very diverse, very welcoming campus. They do have a Student Disability Center with exactly what you would expect: accommodations and testing, note-taking, ASL interpreters, housing, and you also can have an emotional support animal.
Yes. Well, everyone needs one of those, I think.
Yeah, I kind of look at it like if the calculus tutoring doesn't work out, maybe you need that emotional
kitty or
support
the
animal.
puppy. Yeah.
Exactly. They do have a college assistant migrant program supporting seasonal farm workers and legal migrants, and a survivor advocacy and feminist education center. For clubs, 500 or so clubs, including, this was the favorite one they talked about when I toured. I shouldn't say it's my favorite because I don't know that I would actually join this club, but I haven't heard this one before. A lettuce club, where once a year they gather, and whoever can eat a head of lettuce the fastest gets to be the next president.
Maybe we should do that for national elections. It seems like that could be as good as anything.
Well, you took a different turn with that. I was thinking, can we have, a chocolate covered cherry club, and whoever can eat the most gets to be president. I would win that, or, the cupcake club, something like that.
Yeah, I'm making a little joke about being hungry for power here, but
sorry, that sounded right over my head, Lisa. Sorry about that. Didn't pick that up. Obviously focused on the chocolate covered everything.
Yeah.
Anyway, student transportation. So they have the shuttle buses and all of that. They're going to get you around that giant campus. But 80% of students here bring their bikes. And they use them. This is the primary mode of transportation, including longboards and that type of thing. And this campus, and I'm not entirely sure what this means, and I guess I could have looked this up, but it sounds very important. They are a platinum level bicycle friendly campus. So that is a good sign.
Well, being flat really helps. I mean, that's just as much more conducive to me wanting to ride a bicycle.
Yeah, it's so odd, like flat and then giant mountains. It is beautiful. I have a lot of really bad photos I took of this campus because it was pretty. The bad photos are because of my ability here, not because of the campus. Academics, this is an R1 research school, and they get about 5,000 or so students participating in undergrad research. And when we think about research, I think a lot of students think about, being in the lab with microscope. They have some kind of interesting research, like archaeological digs. So you can do a lot of different things at this school. They do have a core curriculum with a heavy focus on writing. There are 8 colleges at the university: Agricultural Sciences, College of Business, Engineering, Health and Human Sciences, Liberal Arts, Natural Sciences, College of Veterinary Medicine and Biomedical Sciences, and the College of Natural Resources. So their most popular majors are business, psychology, and engineering. And then also their undecided track, because you can wait to make that decision until sophomore year.
When you're undecided, are you undecided like within a school, or can you apply to the entire university undecided?
You can apply to the entire university.
That's cool, because a lot of times state schools don't have that.
Okay. They also offer pre-professional tracks. And so you can get an advisor for your major and also your track. So if you are interested in pre-law or pre-veterinary, you'll get an additional advisor for that. Exploratory major. This is your undecided, where you get basically a year or so to explore majors, get involved with clubs, and focus on those big ideas that majors center around. On their website, they do offer a My Majors quiz, and you fill this out, and they're going to give you 10 majors based on your responses that you might want to look at.
Friends, this concludes the first part of Lynda and Lisa discussing Colorado State University. We hope you'll join us next week for the final part. Friends, on Monday's episode, we'll get Susan's thoughts on the NACAC conference, and also Susan will break down a history of NACAC, which I think you're going to find really interesting. And then we'll continue the interview with David Hawkins, and we're looking at what factors do admission offices use to determine who they will admit. And friends, remember, college is not a prize to be won. College is a match to be made. See you on Monday, friends. And that's our show. A big thank you to you, our listeners, for tuning in this week. If you find this podcast helpful, please follow us, and you'll get every single episode as soon as it is released. If you're interested, there are a few ways you can really support our podcast. You can click the share button and send it to your friends and acquaintances. You can help us pay our staff and our expenses by donating on our website. You can write a review for us on Apple or Spotify. I'm the producer of the podcast, but we have a fantastic team of 15. Shout out to our co-host, Dr. Lisa Ruff, Dr. David Williams, Lynda Depker, Susan Tree, Vince Garcia, and Julia Esquivel. And to our substitute co-host, Sylvia Borgo. Our sensational sound engineer is Nemanja Motvich. Our amazing music is from Victor Allen Weeks. Marketing designs are from Kimberly Blass. Lily Parikh manages our Instagram. Our image editor is Talha Khan. Joyce Ducker does our website episode updates. And our webmaster is Stylianos Dimitriou. And if you want to have a coaching session with Lisa, Lynda, or me, just text me at 404-664-4340. If you have a question you want us to answer, or if you have a recommended resource or article you think we should discuss, just send it to questions@yourcollegeboundkid.com. Our favorite method is for you to record your own voice at speakpipe.com/YCBK. By the way, check out our website, where you'll find lots of content that is not on any podcast app. Our website is yourcollegeboundkid.com. If you want to learn about other hot admissions topics, follow us on Twitter at YCBK Podcast. We think of you as our listening family, and we look forward to meeting again with you every single Monday and Thursday.